Let's rank some Dynasty running backs. In Tier 1, I think we all know who these three are. It's Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. I've gone with Bijan, Breece, Jahmyr. I understand really any preference. I really do. But the case with these guys, they tick off all the four Ps. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, the four Ps really being projection, production, of course, perspective, perception. Those four Ps, if you will, are kind of the rationale that I've used in my rankings videos and will continue to use. Quarterbacks, receivers, now running backs. With these guys, they've got the age profile, a lot of team investment, of course, with first round labels on Bijan and Jahmyr. And then with Breece, early second round pick. These guys are the hot commodities. These are the top three running backs in Dynasty. They have great situations. They are going to continue to produce. And frankly, we talk about the four Ps that I introduced now. Perception and projection, those are what's going to dominate the next several months of this Dynasty calendar. And when you think of those two in particular, perception and projection, it's not going to get any higher with these three in particular, rather. And with Bijan, look, he's getting Zach Robinson and, of course, Raheem Morris as his head coach now. I like what that bodes for him. He had Arthur Smith. There's all the memes with that. And we'll get into some guys who later on, who Arthur Smith is now going to kind of be able to control in an offensive system. We'll see. But with Bijan in particular, though, that's looking up. He's got a solid coaching core around him now. It couldn't really have gotten worse, I don't think. And he put an RB1 season, of course, top 12, top 10, I guess 9th overall to be more specific. But with Bijan, look, I'm a huge Bijan guy, maybe a little bit of bias with the Texas 5 jersey there, but I love me some Bijan. I know he didn't look as flashy as times as a Jahmyr Gibbs in his rookie season, but Bijan, for me, he's the RB1. These guys, you talk about perception, right? The value insulation is going to continue to be there. And even if they don't go out and produce, but the reality is they're going to produce. And Breece Hall in particular, I had to give him kind of the tiebreaker at 2 here. With Breece, unbelievable season with him. And 1,500 yards, give or take, from scrimmage, almost got to 1,000 rushing yards. He, frankly, is a monster. He's an absolute monster. And with a limited snap count at the beginning of the season, he's going to be absolutely unleashed with the Jets, continue to be. Even, look, Aaron Rodgers, there or not there, it doesn't matter with Breece. With Jahmyr, the only reason I have him here at 3, I know some have him as 1, and I can understand that. But I think we talk about just the idea of workhorses or timeshares. I know workhorse, frankly, that's out the window. That modern label. Backfields are split. And when I think of the Lions, we'll get into a guy later on, of course, with David Montgomery. He is going to have a considerable piece of that pie. But that doesn't preclude both of those guys from producing, and especially with Jahmyr Gibbs, he's lightning in a bottle. He's so explosive and continue to really be at the top of running back production. I could see, look, all three of these guys being top 6 producers next season. And that's for given their age and just the weight and gold that their name alone carries. These are the 3 that you want to have in Dynasty. But I got to give respect. Talk about Tier 2. Tier 2, it's one alone, and it's Christian McCaffrey here. CMC. With Christian McCaffrey, I feel like he deserves his own tier, frankly. He deserves his own tier because he is, talk about workhorse. Well, he has a 78% snap count, snap share, if you will, which is insane for this day and age. He's on the field for arguably the best offense in the league, one of the best teams, but certainly one of the best offenses. Explosive, does it all. Regardless of what format you could possibly have, this guy, RB1, continued to be for several more years. Truly believe that. I think that's enough said. Let me know if you guys agree with Christian McCaffrey being in his own tier. We see how dynamic he is, and I got to pay some respect in that sense. RB4 in Dynasty, Christian McCaffrey. Of course, the 4Ps, he checks them off. Production, of course, being the box check with Christian McCaffrey. But the perception, of course, is always going to be high. And you just think of the perspective, there's really no one else doing what he's been doing or what he might even be able to do from a ceiling standpoint, which you got to respect. And then moving on to tier 3 here. With tier 3, I got 3. Not on purpose, but I think rightfully so. I've got JT, Kyron Williams, and Devon Achane. Now, I think with these 3 guys, you're still feeling really good about them. And with JT, look, he got that contract. It's not going to be a tough waiting game to start the season again. The perception is always going to be there after the incredible season he posted early in his career. Not that to say that he's old, but still, JT, I love him being in that Shane Steichen offense as an Eagles fan, as just a ball watcher. Pause. Shane Steichen, he's got something brewing over in Indy, and JT will be a big piece of that, along with, of course, Anthony Richardson. I gotta recognize him accordingly here with RB5 label, so to speak. But notice I haven't necessarily given the number designations overtly on these boxes because we're trying to make sense of things in tiers. And I really am of the mindset where within a tier, it really comes down to preference. And that's just my philosophy, and that's what it'll continue to be. But speaking of who's in the middle of this tier, with Kyron Williams, he just exploded onto the scene in his second year, which is interesting after he got counted out. Talk about pre-draft. His pre-draft really seemingly hurt his stock. Ran in the 4.6s, really didn't look like he was going to have anything close to potentially this year too in his career. But man, when he was healthy, when he did play, you talk about just being on the field. And if you're on the field, you're in a position to produce. He did that in spades, in bunches. He saw near Christian McCaffrey type levels when he played, was on the field, and when he was healthy for a full game. In terms of that kind of mid 70% kind of work share, snap count, so to speak. But Kyron Williams, he flat out produced, and he's going to be there with the Rams under contract for the foreseeable future, for a couple more years at least. And man, talk about a situation, and the player itself obviously really checks off all the 4 boxes, and maybe he doesn't in your league in terms of the perception. But listen, if you can buy him for let's say mid-late first round pick, once we get past the 107, I would say, into the 108, 109, especially if we're talking double digits, 110 through 112, give me some Kyron Williams, man. He is utilized in the Rams offense. Sean McVay is not really going anywhere. And man, give me some Kyron Williams. As Devon Achane. Look, he dealt with a lot of injuries, but talk about one of the better offenses, of course, a Shanahan disciple, that is Mike McDaniel. Explosive as they come with Devon Achane. And my bet, which, especially when, look, football, fantasy football, it's not going to be played for another 7 months, right? For this perception time frame, where perception reigns king, Devon Achane, he will hold his weight in gold before, obviously, any football is played. Now, excuse that voice crack, but with Devon Achane, even with the football to be played, I really believe in him, and I just want a piece of the, similar to Jahmyr Gibbs, just that explosive potential. You think about work shares, workhorses, Devon Achane really isn't that. Of course, Raheem Mostert, he's going to be there for, it looks like, at least another year. But with Devon Achane, he doesn't need a lot of volume. It's really just one play, and then it could be a 65-yard touchdown. He will continue to just rise, I believe, in terms of the perception and some narratives, of course, during this offseason. The production, just got to hope and pray that he's on the field healthy enough. But, man, talk about value insulation. We like to think about where he might be a year or two from now, and that's really all we can do talk about dynasty calendars, you can't get too far ahead from yourself. You can't get into 2027, 2026 even at this point. You got to just be where our feet are and not just going out on a limb there, and there and just make outlandish projections. That just doesn't make any sense. With Devon Achane, we know how valued he is, and I just don't see any reason for him to really fall, quite frankly. But that pretty much encompasses the top half of this quote-unquote tiers, if you will, tiers 1 through 3. And again, 7 guys that you got to feel really good about. Effectively high-end RB1s to have in terms of dynasty RB1s. Talking about 12, which were in the context of a 12-team format, if you will. But moving on to, well, who's in tier 4? Outside of that tier 3 kind of line, that marker in the sand, if you will, this is where it starts to get really, really jumbled. And in tier 4, leading off tier 4, I got Ken Walker. I think with Ken Walker, look, you got to love the Mike McDonald hire. The Ravens, DC, talk about coming from that system with that organization. The Ravens ran the ball the most in the entire league. I love what that means for Ken Walker. And look, Ken Walker, when he's on the field, he's flat out been able to produce. Health is a little bit of an issue, but even in a relatively actually split backfield where over the course of the season, him and Charbonnet saw around 50%, give or take, each of them, in and around the 40 to 50% in terms of snap share perspective. Ken Walker, though, really obviously head and shoulders outproduced Zach Charbonnet. And I think that's only going to continue, quite honestly. He was in that Breece Hall draft class. They basically went within 4 or 5 picks. And with Ken Walker, he is a mid kind of back end RB1 in Dynasty that I think you feel pretty good about. You feel decent about in his future prospects. You know, he's going to have a couple more seasons at least in Seattle, as Travis Etienne is going to have a couple more seasons in Jacksonville. And talk about usage rate and just workhorse label in this modern NFL. Etienne really kind of close up there with CMC. We're talking a guy north of 70% in terms of his snap count, his snap share. 73%, I believe. Yes, 73% for Travis Etienne. That's an insane number. That's an insane number. That's an incredible high usage. And look, I just want to revisit this concept. I don't want to overcomplicate this game we play that is fantasy at the end of the day. We could do advanced analytics, metrics, stats, all we want, right? But when you just look at a basic kind of high-level review of what we saw this past season, of the top 7 running backs, 6 of them, in terms of fantasy producing running backs, 6 of the top 7 this past season, 60+% snap share. So the more it just, no, not correlation equal causation, right? But if you're on the field, there's a chance on every play for you to produce. It's kind of as simple as that. And again, I don't like to dumb things down, but we're not doing the Pythagorean theorem backwards, frontwards, sideways here. That's just some food for thought, and that's just some context, especially in a position where I think, talk about the narratives and perceptions, we kind of like to push them aside behind, of course, quarterback and receiver. But talk about, again, a guy, these next several in this tier, Cook, White, Pacheco, guys that are all in and around 23, 24, 25 that are producing, that are on the field, and frankly have a couple more years in them. With Cook, I love the Bill situation. I love what we saw when Brady took over as OC and that usage in the pass game and just being attached to Josh Allen. Almost figuratively, but almost literally at the hip, right, on plays. Being that James Cook is in Buffalo and being that he produced and was explosive, that he was down the stretch that second half of the season, I got to recognize him here. A top 12 running back, so to speak, as Rachaad White is. Talk about, again, one of those top 7 producing running backs from this past season with Rachaad White. What was his usage? Well, he was on the field for actually joint highest with CMC, 78% of the snaps. Not really the most efficient, right? There's some numbers, that whole Bucs offense, that running game was very lackluster from advanced metrics, so to speak, in terms of yards per carry, all that, whatever. But if you're on the field, again, if you're on the field 78% of the time, you got opportunities to produce. And Rachaad White, look, he did that. Not all catches are created equal, right? Not all touchdowns might be created equal, but if you're on the field and you got a chance to produce and you're of a decent age, I got to recognize you where Rachaad White is as Isaiah Pacheco. And look, I maybe was a little bit non-believer after his rookie season, but the reality is, in and around, again, 50% snap share in that Chiefs offense, connected to a Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid, just an effective system to say the least, and a guy that has a running style that seemingly is just going to carry over season to season. Talk about an angry runner. The guy just fights for every yard, and that style, regardless of if Andy Reid retires this season or if Pat Mahomes isn't even there. I mean, who knows? I'm just trying to play if, ands, or buts or what ifs. Pacheco, he's got a role, and he's seemingly a mainstay in that Chiefs offense. The Jerick McKinnons of the world, the CEHs of the world, bless his soul, from a former first-round pick, which is crazy, thinking about first-round pick in that same label as a Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, if you will. But, man, that's he's not in this. We're talking about Isaiah Pacheco at the end of the day, right? And with Isaiah Pacheco, I like what he's done. The production, of course, the projection, the perception. Maybe it's lukewarm, but the perspective, he gets the job done. He gets the job done. He's in a great system for a few more years. And again, 2 to 3 year windows, that's all we can really truly reasonably operate in as dynasty players. Talking about really projection, though, with Tyjae Spears, of course, Derrick Henry, that workhorse, and even Brian Callahan has said, as the new Titans head coach, he hasn't ruled out. He didn't go out and say, "Oh, Derrick Henry is not welcome here." If he wants to return, he can return. But I'm making the bet Derrick Henry is not a Titan when 2024 rolls around, week 1, and I think that bodes really well for Tyjae Spears. And again, this is very much projection in a way, but he also, when he was on the field, he produced, he got usage in the pass game, and you got to love that. And you especially got to love, look, with Brian Callahan and his system, you talk about what that kind of bodes for Tyjae Spears. With the Bengals, talk about usage. Joe Mixon, how he basically was as close to a quote-unquote modern workhorse. We'll get in him a little bit later, but really got to like what the future holds for Tyjae Spears. Maybe not as much for as long, I should say, as Saquon, but with Saquon, I think he's got the perception box. Talk about first-round picks, the second overall pick in his draft year. With Saquon, he is just going to hold that label, that such high perception for as long as he's really in the NFL, I think. And for as long as he's attached to the Giants, he's going to be their offense, it looks like, unless they do something crazy in the draft and they maybe get somehow Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. Potentially very possible. But at the end of the day, they're going to need a quarterback to, I think, really reinvent that offense if they want to be, quote-unquote, multifaceted. But Saquon has been that facet of the Giants offense, and he's used quite a bit, will continue to be because of the sheer athlete and the talent he is. I got to recognize him here in Tier 4. Let me know where you guys put Saquon, because I think this is really where it gets interesting. Some of these guys that are 25, 26, that's where you really just obviously you take in, okay, some production, but you have to project long term. But we say long term again, 2 to 3 years. And I still like that. I like that outlook for Saquon, as I do David Montgomery. Rounding out tier 4 here. Dave Montgomery, he's going to be entering year 2 of a 4-year deal he signed with the Lions. Ben Johnson, going to still be there another year for Jahmyr Gibbs, but for Dave Montgomery. Dave Montgomery has a role, even if he continues the some odd 40% snap share that he gets, 40% in that offense, that is still fine by me. That is plenty for my liking. Moving on to tier 5. A little less jumbled, but still a lot of interesting, complex choices to be made. I've got Josh Jacobs here at the top of tier 5. And really, I think what's important to, I know I've said purposely, okay, I haven't attached a number necessarily in these boxes because I think a tier is as relatively inherently preferential. But if we want to play the counting game, we're here at tier 5, quote unquote, the second to last tier in this ranking video, right? I'm not going to list all 300 running backs in the NFL, practice squad, active roster, but in the context of this video, at tier 5, we're still talking a guy that is a dynasty RB2. A dynasty RB2 with the upside of a fantasy RB1. I think that's still very much in the fold for Josh Jacobs. We'll see where exactly he ends up next season. The tag, to be or not to be, is it with the Raiders or not? Regardless, talk about Josh Jacobs. Another guy that, look, he gets well above 60% odd share when he is healthy and playing and gets that pass game utilization as well. I like the skill set. I just have to put him in a little bit separate tier because of the uncertainty with the contract and the situation. But with Mixon and Kamara, with the top 3 of this tier 5, I've kind of tie broke it by age, youngest to oldest, with Jacobs being younger than Mixon younger than Kamara. But with these 2 guys, Mixon and Kamara, you talk about workhorses, guys that are gonna eat a considerable share of that offensive system that they're going to be in. And with these 2 guys, I think it's a little bit more firm that they stay with the Bengals, Mixon the Bengals, and Kamara the Saints, respectively. But talk about guys that are dynasty RB2s, but frankly, capable of just putting out a top 10, top 5 even fantasy producing season. I mean, give me a piece of them, please. This is where you get past tiers 3 and tier 4. I'm totally cool. I almost want to prefer constructing some of these type of running backs that you know are going to produce. And if they give you 2-3 more years, awesome. That's awesome. And I think that's very possible with Mixon and Kamara both. You know what they're capable of. And if I had to, again, bet on it, I think they're staying where they are. And you could always restructure, right? I just think they've been too much of the identities of both those offenses, and they've produced accordingly to where I have to recognize them here. And maybe it's a hot take. Tell me if you guys think I'm way too high on some of these older, quote unquote, running backs. But I gotta just recognize the production that they put on the field, because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to win some fantasy championships, right? And that's what I gotta embrace with this tier 5 in particular. And then as we get past the top 3 here, look, with Brian Robinson, DeAndre Swift, they're kind of in that 24, 25-year-old age range of running back. So still looking fine for maybe 2 to 3 year window, projecting, right? But with B-Rob, he's not going to have Antonio Gibson, I don't think. Does that open the door for somebody else like a Chris Rodriguez? Sure. Am I going to bet on it? No. Look, do they maybe draft another Brian Robinson in the draft? Sure, they could. But with Dan Quinn there, look, you see the Cowboys and their identity. Look, they tag Tony Pollard. They like to run the ball, right? And I think Brian Robinson, I like what that means for him. And I like the potential. Look, they go in, they draft a Jaden Daniels, a Drake May. I think that offense is humming. even more so than it really ever has since maybe RG3, Kirk Cousins eras. But I got to recognize Brian Robinson here. Talking mid, late, Dynasty RB2, as with Swift, where I've put him here, following B-Rob. And with Swift, as an Eagles fan, I love what he did, put out on the field. And I think, for my money, I think they re-sign him. I think they re-sign him. He's the local guy. And if he's, assuming he's making the bet he is an Eagle, I like what that means for his future. And Kellen Moore, new OC. Look, he was with the Cowboys, with the Chargers most recently. Whoever the OC, regardless, I like the Eagles to run the ball more than they maybe have in this past 2023 season, where Nick Sirianni and, look, a lot of the coaches found their jobs on the line. And I like DeAndre as a pure talent. He's got the receiving upside as well. Got to recognize him here. Tony Pollard, a little bit on the older side of running back, but I think he returns to Dallas. And regardless, Dallas or not, I think he's going to get a considerable chunk of an offense. Potentially gets what we just saw last season, like a David Montgomery contract. I think that's very much in the cards for Tony Pollard. And based on, again, some of the pure volume that he gets, that's an inherent fantasy floor. And I think the perception, depending on, we get through free agency, I think the perception, it's still going to be there. It's not going to waver too much, I don't think. So I think he's somewhat firm, solidified value there with Tony Pollard, recognizing him here in tier 5, as I'm recognizing Javonte Williams. Now, this is, I think, a spicy ranking. Let me know if you guys agree with where I've kind of positioned Javonte here. He really looked good early in his career. Kind of tailed off a little bit. Just not the most efficient. Didn't quite get anywhere near a quote-unquote workhorse type of role necessarily. Sub 50% snap share. And with, look, a Samaje Perine, with a Jaleel McLaughlin, there's just seemingly, with Sean Payton, with the Broncos, there's always a second guy lurking, I think, that just inherently takes away from Javonte Williams, because I don't think he's shown in real life that he's this guy that you can rely upon consistently to produce for you in a truly meaningful top 10 kind of running back caliber way. And so I have to put him here accordingly. Am I a little bit low on him? I don't really think so. Let me know, guys. I think part of what makes him stay here in tier 5 for me is inherently it's some of the perception. I think the perception as Dynasty players, we kind of like to hold on, cross our fingers, hold on to specific players, And that's what I think the case is with Javonte, some of his value, kind of artificial, quote unquote, fake value, given what he's done or not really done on the field. But enough of the glass half empty. There's always, look, and I'm always, by nature, I'm a guy glass half full. And so I can't, in good conscience, put him any lower because, look, I think he could go out there. And look, there's rumors swirling. Broncos, Sean Payton, even when he was out of football on the Colin Cowherd show, he said the NFL should make it a lottery system because of Caleb Williams around the corner. There's apparently rumors now the Broncos, funny enough, although they won some games, kind of played themselves out, then they benched Russell Wilson, just a weird lack of a cohesive plan, it seemed like, with the Broncos, to the point where they're outside the top 10 in the draft, but now it's rumored that they want Caleb, Drake, or Jaden Daniels, one of those top 3. The Broncos are a weird team. It's a weird situation. And, of course, I think, look, it affects some of my ranking with Javonte, but enough of tier 5. Last but not least, we're rounding out with tier 6, who, again, that's a lot of guys here, and this, I think, is going to shock a lot of people with how I've ranked here. I've got Najee Harris here, top of tier 6. And again, these are really kind of the back end RB2 in Dynasty. Flex guys are where you're going to play them quite honestly, right? But with Najee going to get his 5th-year option picked up, so he's got a couple more seasons with the Steelers. And look, with Arthur Smith, I like what that could potentially mean for Najee. I've seen people say Arthur Smith, oh, Jalen Warren going out there. I think with Najee and his physical profile, like, frankly, the guy next to him, like a Derrick Henry, very big, 6 foot plus, 220, 230 plus, a guy that could, in theory, have that eat up that workhorse type of role mentality, but that's really just not been the case this past season with, of course, Jalen Warren, who they kind of split, it's kind of around 50-50, really, but that's still plenty for me with Najee. I think that could only increase with Arthur Smith, to be honest. Really, that doesn't, I don't think, bode too well for maybe George Pickens, maybe Pat Freiermuth's of the world, Deontay Johnson. That passing game is one thing, but with the rushing game, I like what Najee's future holds. Again, we play 2 to 3 year windows. I like that outlook for Najee, and I like him to be, look, what he's been doing. I've ranked him here in Dynasty as a back end kind of early mid 20s, quote unquote, by number, RB2, and that's what he's producing in the NFL. So semi reliable, solid. You know what you're going to get. And look, in good conscience, I could not leave Derrick Henry out of this. I couldn't leave Derrick Henry out of this rankings video. A little bit spicy, maybe unwarranted, according to some. Let me know if you guys agree here, but I just got to put King Henry here because he's going to play football. He's going to play football. He wants to play football. And even if it's another year, you're going to get top 10 type of production, RB1 type production. And that, of course, has a certain floor, or it should be, in my opinion, carry that certain floor of production and recognition. And with potentially the next destination, rumors of the Cowboys, because he's working out in Dallas. I don't know how true or how much that really means for him being a Cowboy necessarily, but with a new situation, I think that only provides a little bit of a bump for Derrick and King Henry there for his value, in the sense that he could very well look, he's going to, I think, have his pick, or he could kind of control to a large degree where he might go. And so if it's to a likable situation, like maybe a Dallas, like a contender type team, that favorability, it's only going to a little bit increase, I think, with Derrick Henry. And you're going to be able to, if you have him, capitalize on that, in my book. And for, of course, production at the end of the day and trying to win titles and fantasy championships, a good asset to have. A good asset to have. And really that kind of rounds out, I think, firm kind of RB2s in Dynasty, so to speak, and kind of and how these rankings are kind of constructed here. But moving on, the last 6 I've ranked here, they're all rookies. They're all impending 2024 rookies. And part of that, the rationale for this, it's rooted in the idea that, all right, these 6 guys, it's a weak, quote unquote, weaker, not as much top end talent in terms of this running back class as obviously, of course, Bijan, Jameer, first round picks. Not going to be a first round pick by any means in this 2024 draft with these 6 guys, any of these guys, but mid to late second round rookie picks. Guys that are frankly in that vacuum of mid to late second round rookie picks, valued, frankly, more valuable than guys that are behind them. Guys that, if you have a Zach Charbonnet, or if you have a Ramondre Stevenson, guys that you would frankly sell for the price of where these guys, these rookies are valued, if that makes sense. These are all, in a way, mystery boxes, right? Their potential to be maybe a next Kyron Williams, or to be a maybe Devon A-Chain, talking about shooting for the stars. You want to, at your core, bet on players, right? You want to just take bets, throw some darts. And these are the next crop of guys that you're going to be able to do so with. And even look, I just mentioned him, Zach Charbonnet, A-Chain, got Tajay Spears, rookies that, look, say they're not going to get the sexy top end of the first round type draft capital as some of the high end guys on this list, but there's a good chance that they still retain, or if anything, steadily rise up in value from their mid, late second round, early third round pick prices. So that's inherently why I'm putting these guys here in tier 6 and why I'm recognizing guys Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum, Braylon Allen, Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd, Bucky Irving, all guys that I'm happy to take dart throws on because they're going to have to go somewhere. Maybe a couple are lucky enough to get mid day 2 capital. I've positioned these guys accordingly, frankly, to how I view their chances to be meaningful NFL producers, to be on the field and to make a difference, right? Because we talk about, again, high level. I don't love this analysis, but it's kind of the hard truth. If you're on the field, you get opportunity, right? You're on the field, you can produce. You're put in a position to produce at least. And I think, look, to some degree, these guys have redeeming qualities in different shapes and sizes to be NFL first, second, or third down type running backs. I think Jonathan Brooks, look, I know he tore his ACL, but I've ranked him here because I think he's maybe got the best single shot of being a guy that could be a running back 1 in an offense. What does that mean? Maybe a 55, 60% snap share, within usage within the offense. But Blake Corum, following him, I love Blake Corum. He reminds me, I'm a little bit biased. I love me some Doug Martin, muscle hamster. He kind of reminds me of him. And I think what we've seen at Michigan, he can eat a considerable amount of carries. Sure, that's maybe tread on the tires, but I think he's got goal line work kind of penciled in for his future in the NFL. And what does goal line work entail? The potential for only 1 yard, only 0.1, but +6 for a touchdown, of course. Earth-shattering math, I know, right? But Blake Corum, I think he, could have a role at the next level as Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen's, I've seen early on, when he was a freshman at Wisconsin, it's like, oh my God, this guy, talk about Derrick Henry's size. He's a huge back, but not necessarily the most explosive, but a guy that could eat carries on first and second down. So I've got to recognize him accordingly here. And also very young prospect with Braylon Allen. With Trey Benson, look, he's really been just a solid kind of do-it-all guy. And Florida State, look, I would have loved to seen a healthy Jordan Travis with him the whole entirety of that season, maybe go into the playoff, play a potential Michigan, Bama, Texas, Washington, just play against the top competition and maybe see what really would have happened. Because Trey Benson goes to the NFL, is with a competent quarterback, I think it could very well be a feature of an offense, have a good considerable role, as my guy Marshawn Lloyd here, who I love. But maybe my bias shouldn't be that way as a South Carolina fan, because he transferred away from the real USC to the fake USC over there in Southern Cal with Caleb. But with Marshawn Lloyd, talk about an explosive guy. He didn't get a lot of carries, didn't get a lot of targets, but his efficiency was incredible. And a guy that I think could be a very nice change of pace in an NFL offense. And with this explosiveness, potentially be a back end type, an RB2, where I've obviously positioned them. And this is obviously all forward looking and projection inherently. And as is the case with, last but not least, with Bucky Irving, he is a great pass catcher. I feel like maybe people are going to think of him as kind of that one-trick pony, a little bit smaller, but he's 5'9", 195, give or take. These are all guys, these rookies that have some meat on the bone. Kind of Jahmyr Gibbs, there was a lot of conversation about his size and what him maybe being below a 200 threshold would have meant for his NFL future. But it's been with Devon A-Chain as well, being in around the 180s even. Size is only but a number. And with these rookies, I've got to put him here as effectively fringe RB2s in Dynasty. I am inherently going to take swings and take bets. And that's especially what I'm going to do here at the running back position. Am I a little bit crazy? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think with how I've ranked these players, so especially the rookies, especially maybe the younger guys. Where are my hits? Where are my misses? I really want to know your guys' thoughts. I interact with every single comment, every single one of you down in the comment section below. Love the engagement. Love just talking Dynasty Fantasy Football, as I know we all do. If you're watching this video, if you're still here, even, you are a psycho. You're a real one. And I love all of you. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, meet me in the comments or drop a like, subscribe. We're on the road. We're on the road. We're going to get there. I'm not putting a number there. Notice how I'm not putting a number there exactly for sub goal, but we're going to get there because we're growing a community. And we're going to keep growing and growing and growing as we hopefully grow our fantasy assets. And I wish you all the best with your players and your rosters, your offseason moves. I'm going to do some more rankings videos, of course, but I've got some ideas in mind. Let me know what you guys, maybe different types of videos you want to see. But have a great one, guys. See you in the next one.